Move on to council business, city attorney, opioid litigation update. David?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. I have been asked to provide an update on the status of the national opioid litigation of which Lakeport is a part, and also to provide the council with an update on the current status. So if I could ask our esteemed technical team to open my PowerPoint.
Both of them.
Team is the operative word. So you've seen these slides with all of our offices. All right, so I first need to acknowledge that many of these slides come via a presentation provided by Shasta County to their Board of Supervisors probably last fall. So I will give credit where credit is due. So nationwide, as you probably are all aware, there's been a huge number of opioids that were sold. I think this statistic, by 2010, there were enough prescription opioids sold to medicate every adult in the United States with 5 milligrams of hydrocodone every 4 hours for a month.
Gross.
Obviously, this was declared to be an epidemic back in 2011, based on the increasing rates of deaths. More than 40 people were dying every day from overdoses. More Americans were killed by opioid abuse than by heroin and cocaine combined. So as a result, we saw increasing newborns affected by drugs that was tested via the placenta or in breast milk. There's a chart showing from 2006 to 2015. This is all data that comes from our complaint that we filed. We don't have Lakeport specific data, but we do have county specific data. Lake County has suffered quite considerably when compared to the state averages. So in 2018, we had 21 deaths due to opioid overdoses. That was the highest in the state per capita. Our rate was 17.02 per 100,000 people back in 2017. These numbers were quite staggering. So as a result, what did we do? This council authorized us to join litigation against manufacturers, distributors, and retailers. We joined about 37 other local agencies within the state by hiring Barron and Budd and a consortium of attorneys. We all share the same legal counsel to bring a lawsuit, which was then consolidated in the Northern District of Ohio with all of the other cases throughout the country. So now there's one federal judge in Northern Ohio, Judge Posner, who oversees all of these cases. There's over 3,400 plaintiffs in these cases. It's described as one of the most complex ever undertaken. So why are we suing the distributors and manufacturers or retailers? Well, essentially it's on a public nuisance theory. So the fact is that these companies knowingly or recklessly created and perpetrated a public nuisance that has affected the local entities in the state in terms of what's been required to remediate and mitigate and treat the harm that's been caused by marketing schemes that were conducted to persuade doctors and patients to use opioids, false misleading claims about the actual risks and benefits of those opioids, failure to report suspicious prescriptions or investigate or refuse suspicious orders, and a failure to prevent diversion of opioids from one state to another for illegal distribution. So those are sort of the legal theories and factual theories on which the cases are predicated. And there have been a few cases that have gone to trial, and there's been a mix in the outcomes of those cases. Some have been found in favor of the local agencies, the counties, cities, and some have found in favor of defendants. So in terms of where else we've been, as you recall, in July 2021, there was a national settlement reached with the three largest distributors of opioids, and that's McKesson, AmerisourceBergen, and Cardinal Health, as well as one of the manufacturers, Janssen, which is a subsidiary of Johnson & Johnson. So we did engage with a group of counties and cities, and because one part is the national part, but then you have to negotiate with your cities and with your counties and cities and your state to determine, okay, once the money comes to California, how is it then going to be allocated? So there were two separate negotiations that were involved in the settlement. The settlement, because obviously the distributors and the retailers, manufacturers, they wanted to have as many claims released as possible. They essentially gave bonuses the more cities and counties that joined in and waived essentially their claims. So they opened it up to entities that actually didn't file a lawsuit. And they said, we'll give you some money if you waive your claims, even though you didn't sue us. And this will prevent you from suing us in the future. And the more entities we could get on board, the higher the payout total to the state and to the counties and the cities. So to meet those participation bonuses, we did a lot of work. The league, we worked with the league to do outreach. CSAC did outreach on that side. And we did get over 96% of the population of the state joining in. Now, it actually interesting. The only way you could opt in if you were a city is if you had a population of above 10,000. So had we not filed the lawsuit, we would have been completely out of ability to participate in the settlement whatsoever. But because we had filed the lawsuit, we are included and we do get funds from the settlement. When we were engaging in the negotiation, essentially we had these three objectives: maximizing the dollars coming into the state, maximizing the local control over how the dollars were used, and making as broad of definition of the permissible uses for the money as we could. So this is what the settlement looked like. Of all the money coming into the state, 15% of it goes directly to the state to deal with opioid remediation issues. 15% of it goes to litigating entities like Lakeport, entities that filed a lawsuit against these defendants. And 70% went to any of the counties or cities with 10,000 or greater population who opted in. And that was really where the bulk of the outreach was to those folks. That 70% bucket is called the abatement funds. And of that 70%, the settlement says that you have to use 50% for what are called high priority uses. And I'll mention what that is in a second. And then the other point is that if you're a city, you can either elect to have that money come to you directly, or you can say, no, I'll let the county deal with it and use it. Because if the city takes on that, if the city takes the money, then they have the reporting requirement for how it was used. So these are the actual high priority uses directly from the settlement agreement. So it's really things that are specific to substance abuse disorder. So operating costs for substance abuse disorder facilities, creating new or expanded treatment infrastructure, addressing needs of communities of color and vulnerable populations. That includes sheltered and unsheltered homeless populations that are disproportionately affected by substance abuse disorder. diversion of people with substance abuse disorder from the justice system into treatment, providing training and resources to first and early responders, implementing best practices for outreach, diversion, deflection, employability, et cetera, and interventions to prevent drug addiction in vulnerable youth. This is, there could be more than this, but right now, these are the high priority uses. So 50% of that 70% bucket have to go toward this type of stuff. And then the other 50%, there's actually quite an extensive list. It's very broad, and it does cover, it has to relate to abating the harm caused by opioid abuse. But this is just sort of a rough estimate of what that kind of stuff is. So that was the 70% bucket, the abatement funds. Because we filed the lawsuit, we also get an extra 15% that the litigating entities get. And there's a lot more flexibility with what we can do with this money. So this can actually be not just used for abating future issues related to opioid abuse, but it can reimburse past expenses. It can reimburse attorneys' fees. It will fund some of these fee processing, because our attorneys are working on contingency. So they will get, they're agreeing with respect to these settlements to only take 3%, even though their contract will allow them to get a lot more. They're really only take 3% of the total funds that are coming in. So that will be coming out of this bucket. So have we received any money yet? Yes, we did start receiving money from the distributor settlement and from the Janssen settlement. These are trickling in. They're going to come in once a year. So the distributor settlement is coming in over 18 years, and the Janssen settlement over 9 years. So far we have $46,000 that we've received, and that's just for 2 years. We actually should be getting year 3. We may have already gotten it. It's supposed to be coming in very soon. So they're not huge numbers, but they are funds, and this is, it really is based on population and the impact on our particular community. So I think we are getting more than say someone who's in an area that's less impacted by opioid abuse. But remember, we wouldn't get any of this money at all if we hadn't actually joined in the litigation. And we have elected for the direct payment. So this money is at this point in the city's coffers. It's not going to the county, although we always have the ability to change that in the future. So that's the distributor in Janssen, which you guys are familiar with. Now, you may have heard in the news, there are 5 more defendants who have reached a tentative nationwide settlement in these cases. And that's Teva and Allergen, who are also manufacturers, and then retail pharmacies of Walgreens, Walmart, and CVS. So these are the amounts that are going to be available depending upon how many entities we can get to join in. And these are totals for the nation. So 4.2 billion from Teva over 13 years, 2.3 from Allergen over 7 years, 5.5 billion from Walgreens over 15, 3 billion over 3 to 6 years from Walmart, and CVS with 5 billion over 10 years nationwide. I believe California is like you get like 9%. We're by far the largest, obviously, recipient because we've got the biggest population. Yeah, 9% is coming to California. So that's 20.2 billion total in the best case scenario. So it's a little bit smaller than the distributor and Janssen settlements combined, which was 26 billion. So the terms of these settlements with Teva, Allergen, Walmart, Walgreens, and CVS is essentially the same as the ones with the distributors and Janssen. So just like with those, we need to use the money within 5 years. We need to opt in for direct distribution. We will have reporting requirements. The uses for them is going to also be the same. It's gonna have the same sort of waterfall with the 15% to the state, 15% to litigating entities, and the 70% abatement bucket. And we need to opt in or out by April 18th. That is the date that they are requesting, because what they need to do is the defendants have something in the settlement that says there has to be a critical mass of states and local entities that are going to participate in order for the settlement to go forward. Because if there's not enough claims that are getting released, then they're not going to release this money. So we're in this phase now. Is this all of the money that we're going to receive? No. First of all, there are some bankruptcies that have happened. A few entities went into bankruptcy soon after we filed these lawsuits. Mallinckrodt, Endo Pharmaceuticals. So those we're going to have to negotiate separate allocation agreements with the state, which likely are not going to be as favorable as the ones where we get essentially 85% of the money coming in. And then there still are defendants in the cases that we haven't settled with. So with that, I'm ready for the Q&A.
Questions? Nothing? Anyone from the public? Oh, it cleared out. Geez, David.
I do have a question.
Go
So
ahead.
how do we, when you were saying we got this money, talking about Lakeport has already received some money?
Right. So the
Yes.
slide with the figures, that's Lakeport's
Gotcha.
money.
So how are we getting the money into the abatement? Those identified purposes. What are we sort of a pass through to others, or do we have, what's the mechanism there?
Well, so we're going to have reporting requirements. So we're going to need to use that money. We've got 5 years to use it. And we need to identify a program or programs that fit within the requirements of the settlement. And so that's something that staff is working on identifying now. I mean, there's probably already programs that we have that the police department in particular is using, that, funding for Narcan and trainings for how to use those types of things, as well as some of the crisis behavioral health responders that we're working with. So all those types of things could potentially be things that we can fund with the abatement funds.
Any other questions? Do we have anyone online?
None online.
All right. Thank you, David.
Sure.
Next, our city manager with congressional community project funding. Kevin?
Yes, good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. You'll